and welcome to Wake Up with Dr. Cheryl. Welcome back. Tonight, our show is about the wealth of loving your genes, and not the kind of jeans that you wear, like pant jeans, but epigenetics. And we have Dr. Kenneth Pelletier with us tonight. Welcome, Ken. Dr. Ken.
Good to be with you.
Yes, it was great to meet you the other day at the book passage and talking about his book right here. This is it. Change Your Genes, Change Your Life. Oh my goodness, where to start? Well, give us a little background about yourself. And I know you have so many accolades, but if you could just condense it so we can really get into the conversation.
Well, I guess the first is I'm a clinical professor of medicine at University of California School of Medicine in San Francisco. And prior to that, I was a professor of medicine at the Stanford Medical School. My main areas of research are working with large corporations, actually developing interventions in work sites to basically keep people working healthier, longer, with higher performance. And that's my conventional research area.
And how are you doing that?
30 years ago, actually, at UCSF, I started a program called CHIP, and it's the Corporate Health Improvement Program. And we have 15 companies that we meet with twice a year. They're the medical directors, some of those companies. They include IBM, Ford, Dow, Lockheed Martin, Oracle, PepsiCo. So they're major corporations, but they're all committed to improving the health and well-being of their workers because it's their money. When they have a medical disability issue, it's their money, not an insurance carrier. So they want to know how they can help keep their employees healthy, and we meet mutual research projects.
And do you work with the top CEOs and the management on that?
We do. Some of the projects, yes, we did. We actually conducted a telephonically based mindfulness meditation program with all the senior managers of Dow, and had some absolutely astounding results, which we published in the Journal of Occupational Environmental Medicine. The goal was to improve their performance and productivity, but we had one. Now these are petrochemical engineers, senior management at Dow, and we had one man say, I was driving home the other night and I pulled off to the side of the road to watch the sunset.
Oh, well, wonderful.
Not something you expect.
Yes.
So we had a major, that was in the performance objectives for the study and intervention were all clearly demonstrated. So there were some other beneficial aspects to their life as their personal life.
Well, that's so important. That's where it all starts.
Yes, it does. It really does.
Oh my. So in listening to I know it was just a small portion of what you do and you teach and everything. Can you talk about biomagnetic forces?
Well, we are electromagnetic organisms. Our brain, our central nervous system, and outward from our body, from anywhere between 15 to as much as 30 feet, there is an electromagnetic radiation. And there was some research actually conducted at MIT, probably as long as 25 or 30 years ago, in what they call the SQUID, or the subquantum interference detector. And it's where they have a person in a room that's shielded for all known electromagnetic activity. They wanted to see, was there a detectable field from the human body? The answer was unequivocally yes, but what was even more interesting is they found that the strongest detectable field was an emanation from the heart. And when you looked at it from the outside, looking at the person, the vortex of energy was a clockwise spinning wheel.
You mean right around your heart?
A clockwise spinning wheel.
Or around your whole aura, or your whole, just around your heart?
Just right over the heart.
Okay.
Clockwise spinning wheel. That's literally the definition of chakra. which is a spinning energy wheel in Ayurvedic medicine. So we are, in fact, a bioelectromagnetic system. We're connected to all the energies around us, our physical environment, our emotional environment, genetic environment. So we are very much interconnected with everything that is around us and with everyone who's around us.
So what about love?
Ah, well, let's see if I had any answer to that. I'd collect a Nobel Prize. Every philosophy, every religion, every spiritual belief has love as its core. That love is the great healer. It's the great balm for all wounds. It is, in effect, the fundamental force in the universe is love. To love each other, to love the environment, to love all sentient beings, even plants, certainly animals.
Do you
The
think that,
more love we have, the less violence, the less
yeah.
hatred, the less division and animosity. And so to me, that's the most fundamental force that we have.
So in essence, do you think that love would affect your genes directly?
Oh, there's no question about that. Most of the time in research, we tend to look at the negative consequences, so they're easier to detect. So we tend to look at the negative consequences of stress. And we know that stress has a major negative impact on the gene. As an example, it increases inflammation, and inflammation leads to things like irritable bowel, heart disease, arthritic disorders. So we know that stress has a very negative effect on the expression of inflammation in the genes. What we know less about is if love, compassion, forgiveness, caring, if that has a positive effect, although we know that when people experience positive emotions, that the electrical activity in their brain becomes much more synchronous. The left and right hemispheres are more in sync. There's a greater output of endorphin, which is a pain-reducing, naturally occurring hormone in the body. That oxytocin is increased in terms of its ability to actually induce a high or a feeling of euphoria. So there is a growing body of research that demonstrates that positive emotions, love, compassion, has a positive impact. And we're beginning to see that that has to have an influence or an impact at the genetic level. I'm not sure we've actually looked at that in research, but the evidence points in that direction.
Well, and I know I heard you say that we really are predestined only by 5% of our genetic makeup, and we can change that by 95%.
That is correct. I think most of us, including most people in the medical world, have a misconception that the gene is like the hard drive in your computer, that it's a set of rules that dictate biologically your height, your weight, eye color, diseases that you will contract, how long you will live, etc. And that's just not at all accurate. About 5% of everything we see as a disease, is 5% of characteristics of us as human beings are what they call fully penetrant genes or monogenic. So that gene will lead to that characteristic unequivocally. In the other, literally 95% of everything about our life, how long we'll live, our diseases, intelligence, ability to cope, all of the cognitive abilities, all of that is determined later by our environment, lifestyle practices, diet, stress, psychosocial factors, environmental determinants. So we literally influence our genes more than our genes influence us.
You know, when I heard you say that, I felt a sense of freedom. I did. I felt mentally free. And the question that I wanted to ask you, and I said to you that I would wait until today, is I'm an RH baby. And I'm just wondering how much, since I had to have a blood transfusion at birth, how much, is there a predisposition to genes? How does it affect, if any, my genetic makeup?
Well, if you're an Rh factor person, that means you have a very strong push in a direction toward inflammation, toward arthritic deterioration. But having said that, there is great research that's come out of Stanford for many years. Kate Lorig, who's a professor of rheumatology there, which has demonstrated that even people that have a strong predisposition toward arthritic disorders can have greater range of motion, less medication, more movement, less pain through psychosocial interventions, through stress management, through moderate exercise, through correct diet, through appropriate medication, not excessive medication, but appropriate medications. So it's not a doomsday push. And all of us have one or more diseases. All of us have a push toward heart disease or arthritis or irritable bowel or cancer. We're all born with certain weaknesses in our genetic code. Whether that becomes manifest or not is dependent on everything we do from the time of roughly 9 months. If you're going to manifest a monogenic disease, it will show up generally in the first 6 to 9 months of life. Now, there are late onset diseases, certain forms of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, that have a late life onset, but those are predetermined genetically within the first 6 to 9 months. And even those are modifiable to a large degree.
Do they have tests to show that? At that age?
There are, as you know, there are now, maybe 12 to 15 companies that do genetic testing. I don't really advocate that because of a couple of particular reasons. There are two ways to use genetic testing. One is disease prediction, kind of pointing the finger. You have a 30% or a 40% chance of a particular disease or condition. And that's alarming to most people. They think it's a doomsday. But the reality is that means that other people who have exactly the same genetic predisposition end up in the 50 or 60% who don't get that disease. And that's important to remember. So it's a point of information. It's not a doomsday prediction if you have a genetic test. The approach that I've taken in our research is really what's called more healthy biomarkers. So you use the same genetic testing, but what you're looking at are what markers in the body. Give an example, blood lipids. So your cholesterol level is a certain range. You don't want to be too high or you don't want to be too low. Right. If you have that information, then you can say, okay, I can move it more in an optimal range. When you move enough of your biomarkers by knowing what they are into the optimal range, then you are the one having the influence. You are the one taking control. You're the one who's determining whether or not your genes are going to be good or whether they're going to be bad. But it's your decisions.
Well, I like having that freedom.
Well, I'm glad, because it is a very optimistic. Some people are afraid of that. They don't want the responsibility. They don't think about, gee, I don't want to have that much influence over my life.
Oh,
but
my. Well, it
me,
takes all kinds.
I agree. I can't imagine that not being good news, that you do have a substantial influence over your health, your longevity, how your intelligence, your cognitive ability, your states of happiness, all of the above, what you gift, if you will, in genetic inheritance to your children, et cetera. So to me, it's a very good message, a very optimistic one.
Well, I'm not still real clear because, I know that there's Rh factor in your blood. And since in fact, the year I was born, they came up with the Antiserum for I guess they call it a blue baby, but an Rh factor baby.
Yep.
So really, it really won't have any effect except for the general, what you have said, 5%. And then I have 95% take care of myself on
Correct.
all the levels that you talked about,
Correct.
which
Correct.
I am definitely in tune with. So what do you mean by epigenetic modification?
Well, epigenesis is, epi means above, around, surrounding, encasing. So it's like an epicenter in an earthquake. You have a center and you have an epicenter. So activity that surrounds the point of contact. And in the gene, you have an epigenome. And what that means, around every gene is a coding. It's a molecular coding. It's called a single nucleotide polymorphism, which is a mouthful, or a SNP. And it's a biochemical coating around the gene that acts like a rheostat. And depending on your diet, stress, environmental influence, that's turned up or turned down, just like a rheostat. So if you have something that's inflammation, that can be turned up by stress, it can be turned down by meditation. And that's what we mean by epigenesis, which are all of the influences that surround and influence the gene expression. The gene does not change. The gene is invariant unless it's damaged by radiation or petrochemical exposure. So we're not talking about modifying the gene per se. What we're talking about is modifying is expression or suppression of that characteristic.
Okay. So I know I watched one of your videos with, is it Premal, Deva Premal? And I was interested in what forms that you really practice as far as meditation.
Well, I love Deva's music, and I'm an avid sailor. And whenever I'm sailing, I listen to her music all the time because it goes with the kind of balance and serenity with setting sails, balancing with tides and currents, and the movement of a hull in the wind. So that for me is a very meditative state. Ever since I was an undergraduate, I've practiced essentially a form of Tibetan Buddhism. It's evolved and changed over, decades. But I still basically do a Tibetan-based meditation, always have, and have studied that in one of my first major studies was a study of adept meditators who could control bleeding and pain through their meditation practice. And that told me something here is very real, that their mental training had an enormous sway over their body. And I found that intriguing. And I don't meditate because of that reason, but I meditate because it helps me to stay in the positive emotions that we talked about earlier.
The
Love,
balance.
understanding, compassion.
Yeah.
I really try to live every part of my life as much as possible from a positive, loving place.
Mhm. Now to teach that around the world, that would be absolutely wonderful.
I think that's what
One
our great teachers try to do.
one person at a time.
Right. Well, Gandhi's statement was, be the change you want to see in the world.
Yeah.
And I really believe that. I think each of us has a responsibility to become the best expression of love, compassion, empathy, caring for others, understanding, nonviolence that we possibly can be. When each of us takes that responsibility, collectively, it will come to pass.
Absolutely. So how or when did you, if you ever change, the traditional medical doctor, they sometimes are so narrow and in their practice, when did you go beyond the box?
Well, it's a bit of a long story, but in a nutshell, I was at school in Zurich, and a part of my fellowship was I had to remain in school in order to receive my stipend. And after I was there about 6 months, one of the head administrators, a German woman, Frau Baumann, said to me, you really hate it here, don't you? I said, yes. And she said, well, look, I will sign off on you being in attendance, and I will mail you your stipend wherever you are So I took off and I started traveling. Ended up on a Greek island of Tinos. It's a small island in the Greek archipelago. And on that island is a chapel. And for the Greek Orthodox, it's a chapel where miracles have taken place. So it's like Lourdes for the Catholics, it's a Tinos chapel for the Greek Orthodox. I was on that island, and all of a sudden, people began descending. I didn't know what was going on, but I saw people that were obviously in extreme pain. They'd go to the chapel. A little while later, they would emerge. They'd be pain free. Saw people with gnarled limbs who were able to flex their hands, straighten their arms, walk. I didn't see eyes regenerate. I didn't see limbs regenerate, but I did see changes in their physiology that made me start to realize that what I was learning in biology and physiology and neurology was simply not all there was. It wasn't all about bones and cells and striate muscles, that there was a force in the mind which governed these factors. And that was a turning point. And that's when I came back to UCSF and started doing the studies of the adept meditators. I really wanted to try to understand the nature of this mind-body interaction. So that was a turning point.
Okay.
It was a turning point.
Well, it would be nice for you to teach a lot of doctors the same same practice.
It is happening. You know, it's
Yeah.
happening. There's a program at the University of Arizona called the Center, which is at the Center for Integrative Medicine,
Yeah.
founded by my very longtime friend and colleague, Andy Weil.
Yeah.
And they've now trained about 1,600 doctors in what they call integrative medicine. And they spend 2 years in coursework in Ayurvedic medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, meditation, mind body, chiropractic, herbal. Not that they're going to practice any of those alternative disciplines, but it gives them an understanding to practice differently, to listen to what their patients really need, to kind of orchestrate that clinic where you could have specialized practitioners, you could have lay acupuncturists in a clinic working together to give a person the best possible care. That's what integrative medicine is.
Right.
It's taking conventional care, alternative care on an evidence base, putting them together for the benefit of the person. So it's happening.
Amen.
It is happening.
Amen. Amen. So where do you see yourself going with, I mean, I know you have your new book, your latest book, and I've been reading snippets of it. And I mean, I've already learned quite a bit just listening to you. So where do you see going forward with this?
Well, right now we're in the final stages of a research project that will result in what we're calling a tripartite assay. And it's a fancy way of saying that we really need 4 elements if you're going to have a biochemical picture of who we are. If you know who you are biochemically, then the idea of a high fat, low fat, keto diet, fruit juice diet, whatever it happens to be, all the confusions that we're barraged with become irrelevant, because you will know biochemically that you are predisposed to be able to metabolize lipids, fats, very easily. So to have a low-fat diet for a person who metabolizes lipids superbly is meaningless. Not
Right.
everyone needs a low-fat diet.
Right.
In fact, sometimes it can be a negative. So we're working on this assay that will have genetic markers, then blood markers. So the gene gives a push, the blood is where it shows up, and then the biome or the intestinal tract. So you see after the body metabolizes the nutrients in the blood, what's the byproduct? And you can see that in the biome. And the biome or the gut is really the critical factor right now. It's the least, the first 2 are well developed, they exist.
The second
think that
brain?
within the next year, we'll see the biome. And it's tricky because the biome has trillions of cells. There are more cells between your mouth and anus than in your entire body. For women, it's even more so if you include the reproductive organs. So we're trying to develop a set of biomarkers in those 3 areas that will then be coupled with a genetic counselor to help people interpret that information. Once we have that, then we'll have something very real to offer people that people can access over the counter without without prescription orders, without laboratory interference. It'll be a real self-care teaching who am I at a biochemical level. I think it's
So
going to be a huge breakthrough.
is that through your saliva or your urine, or how will that be determined?
Right. Well, the genetic markers are through a cheek swab,
Oh, okay.
just a swab on the inside of your mouth. Blood is a blood draw, and there's new technologies which make blood draw totally painless. In fact, there's a thing that you put on your arm, and in a vacuum, it draws out 200 microliters of blood painlessly and leaves a little red mark. You take it off, that's the end of it. And then you send that to a lab. So that's on the blood markers. And with the biome, it's just a stool sample.
Oh, okay.
And that's analyzed in a lab.
Right.
So when you have the genetic marker with the swab, the blood draw, and then the stool sample, you've got the three basic components that you need.
So you're hoping maybe within a year or so that'll be available?
Yes, the first two are available now.
Oh.
And there are some companies that actually are doing a pretty good job of testing the biome, but I think that's still in an early stage. What I've likened it to are hieroglyphics before the Rosetta Stone. So we know there are 300 different colonies and types of bacteria in the intestinal tract. They're in constant interaction. Some are benign, some are negative, some are neutral. And we can see what's going on. I mean, you can see how this changes. I mean, literally, every time you drink or eat something, your biome is changing. So it's constantly in interact. These changes we're talking about are happening in seconds and minutes. The longest period of time in which any of this has an effect on the body is about 10 to 12 weeks. So we're a very dynamic, going back to your first questions about bioelectromagnetics, we are a dynamic electrical biochemical system. We're in constant change and constant flux. To me, that kind of makes all the work we're doing really fascinating.
Do you agree that your stomach is basically your second brain?
Well, to some degree, that's true. There's a person, Emmerich Mayer, who's a gastroenterologist at UCLA. He's written a great book called The Brain-Gut Connection, and he's a very eminent gastroenterologist. And what he points out, and correctly, that the greatest similarity in receptors in the gut is in the brain. So there is an intricate connection of immunity, neurological, biochemical, and hormonal between the gut and the brain. It's a very intimate, ongoing, changing connection. So suddenly the idea of functional medicine, of foods can be good medicine, that the way we eat has a profound influence on every condition, both mental and physical, begins to make sense. And we're beginning to learn how to use dietary practices to optimize health.
So another question is, do you practice any spirituality besides the meditation? And if it's too personal.
No, well, that's a good question. I mean, I started life as grew up Catholic, a French Catholic.
And where were you from originally?
Oh, I grew up in Westerly, Rhode Island, in New England.
Oh, okay.
So I grew up as a French Catholic. I gave that up when I was about 11 years old, decided I'd had enough of the church hypocrisy. And then really, that's when I began to develop an interest in meditation practice. So I don't think that anything I do now I would label as a particular religious belief. But it is a spiritual sense that I have a purpose. Everyone in the world has a purpose. Everything in the world has a purpose. There's a purpose to an alive and vital, evolving universe that's moving into a higher order of reality. So that I believe that's kind of my makeshift spirituality.
So at 11 years old, you became aware of wanting to be different from what you were taught.
I was aware of the hypocrisy. I also became a vegetarian, so it was a real awakening.
At 11 years old. Wow.
Yeah, about 11 or 12 years old.
Wow.
And my parents were not surprised.
Yeah.
They said, you know, you never liked meat, and I never did. I never liked the taste or the texture or the flavor. So for me, it wasn't a philosophical change. I just didn't like it.
Yeah.
And fortunately, growing up in New England, um, you could, you know, fish was a mainstay.
Oh, sure,
And
sure.
so that allowed me to shift over into a totally different protein
And
base.
and lobster.
Sorry about that phone. I don't know why it's ringing.
Oh, oh well. Um, so, what other wonderful things would you like to share?
Well, to me, you know, I wrote a book a while ago, Sound Mind, Sound Body, and I really interviewed a number of people that I thought I wanted to see what constituted optimal health. What did health really look like? And there were people that I interviewed: Norman Cousins,
Oh yeah.
you know, David Rockefeller, George Lucas, Dorothea Johnson, who is the medical director for AT&T. And anyway, I had two people in mind that I had to encompass for this definition of health. One was Stephen Hawking,
Oh
who was a
yes.
brilliant mind
Sure.
in a totally disrupted body. The other was Bruce Jenner, and it was right after he had won the decathlon. So that was an example of a great body, and by his own admission, not a very bright mind. I mean, he considered himself to be modest intelligence. So whatever definition of health had to encompass both extremes. And by the end of the book, the best definition I could come up with was a life fully and well expressed. So whoever you are, whatever your gift is, whatever your belief system is, you express it, whatever that means.
Yeah.
However
Own
you
it.
live it, however you bring that out into the world, that's your most spiritual life. When you express fully and completely who you are without reservation, and do so in love, and do so in caring and compassion for others, everyone you encounter, that's a deeply spiritual life. And I think, to me, that's kind of an ultimate goal for all of us.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And you know, everybody evolves on a different level, and
We do.
you know,
Yes.
and that's also being able to honor that. That as far
Yes.
as you know, my experience with all the interactions I have with people, it's like, you know, well, they're there, and I'm here, and you're there, and you know, it's all good.
It takes courage to be who you are.
It does. It
It
definitely
really
does.
does.
But you know, I had to fight for my life coming onto this planet, so I just keep going.
I can tell. That's, that's a great quality that you have.
Thank you. Thank you.
Seriously.
Well, I can see you have that as well.
Indeed. Indeed.
Oh, so have you started working on your next book?
Oh my God.
Or how many books?
I've written 14, and
You've written 14.
14 books.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And after every book, I always say, that's it. That's the last one, because it's a very
It's
isolating,
yes,
very
it's
disciplined,
intense.
lonely. I mean,
Yep.
you're sitting with your own thoughts and
I
ideas
know.
for,
I've written 2 books, so I understand.
so you know the problem.
Yep.
And so right now I'm in a postpartum
Okay.
state of happiness, which is this book is now done, and now we're talking, and that's kind of fun, and I'm back to doing my research. And you know, I wasn't planning on this genetics book. It came out of my corporate program, because a lot of the medical directors 7 or 8 years ago were asking their executives, were coming to them and saying, what about genetic testing? Should we include that in our annual executive physical? And when they asked me, I said, I don't know. I don't know. You know, in medical school, it was Watson and Crick, the DNA structure, DNA, RNA replication, end of lecture. That was it. That's all we knew. So I said, I don't know. And so I plunged back in to really learn this new information,
Yeah.
and try to, you know, make sense of that.
Well, it's wide open, isn't it?
It is. It is. It definitely is.
And I mean, it feels like you're on the cutting edge too.
Well, at some point, probably there'll be another book that'll. I'm not waiting for it or hoping for it, that will emerge. And if so, well, having written 14 books, I'm not ambitious
Yeah.
in many
Yeah.
ways. I just get tired of thinking about the same
Right.
thoughts. And at some point, I just decide I'm going to write them down so I don't have to keep saying
Yes.
the same thing or thinking the same things over and over. So I sit down and I start writing. And people say, "How do you write a book?" As you know,
That's
one word at a time.
yeah, and a little bit each day.
That's it.
That's
No
how I
secret.
did it.
Pen in hand and paper or
Yep.
computer and one word at a time.
Yes, you don't want to be an example of Einstein saying, if you keep thinking the same thing over and over and over, you're a little crazy. So you have to dispense it. Anyway, so how often do you go sailing?
Well, when I'm busy, I probably get out on the water once a month. I try to get out 2 or 3 times a month. I mean, when you asked about spirituality, I mean, for me, the most deep spiritual experience is sailing. And there's a time when the wind, the currents, the motion of the water on the hull is so balanced that you can literally steer the boat with one finger on the wheel. That state of equanimity, that perfect balance of all of these forces that are greater than yourself. The ocean is greater, the wind is greater,
Yes.
currents are greater than you, the boat is much heavier, much greater force than yourself.
Perfect
All of that is
synchronicity.
equanimity, that perfect
Yeah.
point of equanimity.
Yeah.
It only lasts for maybe 3 or 4 minutes, and it goes out of sync, and you're back to steering and sailing and compensating. But those 3 or 4 minutes are bliss. I mean, everything stops. You enter the void, you enter the silence, you become at one with all those
All of
forces.
it. Yes.
And so that for me is the most deeply spiritual, meditative practice for me.
Absolutely. It sounds
Some people
wonderful.
consider sailing a sickness, but in my case,
Oh
I
no.
grew up
No,
loving it and always have.
I've been out in the bay several times, but the bay can be pretty hard. The currents.
San Francisco Bay is
Oh.
one of the most challenging bodies of water in the world.
Definitely, definitely. So do you go out in the ocean then? Because you're
Yes.
in Carmel, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so you go out in the ocean.
Oh, yeah. Well, San Francisco Bay, even outside the Golden Gate, as soon as you go literally 100 feet west of the Golden Gate, you are in the ocean. It goes from bay chop to ocean swell. So the ocean, the open Pacific Ocean is right outside your door in San Francisco. And certainly in Monterey Bay is even more open to the ocean than San Francisco Bay. So when you're out on Monterey Bay, the amount of marine life, whales, otters, dolphins, orcas, gray whales, blue whales, humpbacks, is in great abundance. So it's for a sailor, it's a paradise.
Yes, I've been out there with the whales, and I understand that the orcas stay way out. They won't come in.
It's interesting. On occasion, they come in very close. There are what they call transient orcas, and there are resident orcas. So the transient orcas are ones that are literally migrating through, and they will come in actually quite close. They're looking for baby whales, seals as a food source, and whale watchers and certainly people out on their boats very often will report, especially around late summer, early fall. That orcas are quite abundant in the Monterey Bay Marine Sanctuary.
Oh, well, that's nice to know.
Yeah, they're quite spectacular.
Yes.
I've kayaked with them in Vancouver, in the Queen Charlotte Islands, and that's quite an experience.
Oh,
so
I'm sure.
Different matter.
Yes. Well, they love the San Juan Islands up there.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So, oh my goodness. So tomorrow you will be at the Ion up in Petaluma delivering another of your Change Your Genes, Change Your Life.
Yes, I'm actually going to be using slides and having actually a real, more formal presentation with them. And my connection to ions goes back to knowing Ed Mitchell when he started it in either 1973 or 74. But I met him the year he started it.
Oh, okay.
And we were lifelong friends. And so he had a great influence on my early thinking.
Well, isn't that wonderful? And we still have our old friends, colleagues. So how's it feel to be at home?
Well, after a lot of travel, it's been great. I mean, with the book, I've been in probably 7 or 8 major cities in the last few months with book signings and lectures. I was in London, Paris, um, Florence, Singapore.
But what a wonderful places to be, though.
They're all good, but they're all wonderful
Yes.
places. But
Yes.
as you know, there's no place like home. So
Yes.
it's always good to get back. And there's nothing like California and the Bay Area and the Central Coast. I think it's one of the most remarkable places in the world.
We live in paradise.
Yeah.
I feel blessed. We live in paradise. I just don't want it to be ruined.
I agree.
Ooh, anyway, so if you were to give, or I should say, giving some wise advice to our viewers, what would you advise?
With regard to,
Well, health, just living health. I know
well,
that's general, but
well, certainly, I think at the core of health is some form of being able to go internally to a place of quiet, balance, restoration, regeneration. I think that's just a core practice that allows you to know who you are, what's right, what are your values, are you doing a good job, asking all of the questions about what is your life really about. And so I think that's at the core. The other is the realization that none of us has a get up tomorrow morning card. We don't know how long our life is going to be. None of us. And that may sound morbid, but I don't take it as morbid. It really is a realization to make the most of every minute, every encounter, every interaction with a person, to express your ideas, to do the best work that you can, to be of help to others, to express your beliefs. You may have beliefs that other people are in profound disagreement, and you hear from other people with whom you have profound disagreement. So to accept that, to listen to even the most egregious pronouncements, and certainly in our political climate, we hear those every day. But it's to not judge, because you can say, I don't like that idea, that's fine, but to listen with an open heart, open mind, to appreciate why that person believes that. What is it in their life that's brought them to that point in time? So to have a sense of compassion and forgiveness. And the other is that, to me, we're faced with two great crises. One is violence. And to go to that inner quiet place, violence does not exist. It's not an essential part of life. And wherever violence and aggression and anger show up in our individual lives or in our environments, I think we need to do what we can to minimize that. Secondly, we are in a profound ecological crisis. And some people say, oh, there's no global warming and whatever. And I think the global warming is a gross misnomer. It sounds like a nice little sauna. It's not a sauna. It's a global climate change that I believe in some circumstances is already irreversible. Mm-hmm. And irreversible to the point of where we may be creating the greatest extinction of organisms, including ourselves, on this planet that's ever occurred.
Yeah,
It'll make the extinction of the dinosaurs look like a picnic.
The bees, the insects are disappearing. Fish are disappearing.
Totally agree. totally agree that we look at the large game animals, and we are, with the lions or the gorillas, and those are, and the whales, and those are correct and right. But what we don't see is that 70 some odd percent of the insect species in the world have disappeared. The monarch butterflies in California, which used to number in the 30 and 40 millions, this year the migration in Santa Cruz, Monterey is down to 30,000. 30,000 from 30 million. There's been a
Wow.
97%
Oh,
decline in a monarch butterfly.
oh my
Now, if
goodness.
we can't be concerned as a species about something that beautiful, that delicate, that is a canary in the coal mine. So it is due partially to climate change. It's due to pesticides, unequivocally. It's due to rampant forest fires, all of those factors. We need to wake up. And when I talked about we need to express ourselves, we need to take a stand and look at our own consumption of petrochemicals, our use of pesticides, our use of foods that are unhealthy. And by unhealthy, I simply mean foods that are inorganic.
Right,
The
absolutely.
only foods that the human body really ingests and utilizes appropriately is organic. It's a little bit more expensive, but with urban gardens, I think we can do it. So I guess that I would end on that preachy note. I
Well,
think
you pay now or you pay later.
we have a serious, profound global ecological crisis, and we need to take it very seriously.
Oh, absolutely.
Planet Earth, when they say save the planet, planet's going to do just fine. It's
Mother
the human
Earth.
species that may disappear.
Yes, yeah. And we're the ones that are causing the issues, the problems too. So
Yes.
that's why I call my show Wake Up, Your Consciousness and Your Awareness, because it's we have never been in this situation before, ever, and at least not in my lifetime.
No.
Politically, ecologically speaking, and yet there's a lot of expansion in the awareness of our mental and emotional state, but there's still a lot that are not.
Yeah, despite everything, all the dire things that I just sort of extrapolated, I'm profoundly optimistic. I really am. I mean, it may seem foolish, but I am optimistic because I see great spiritual teachings in the world. I see 4Ocean, which is the company or foundation that's created that is actually cleaning up the Great Pacific Garbage Vortex, which is twice the size of Texas, a huge heap of garbage between Hawaii and the United States that's twice the size of Texas.
Right.
They're out there cleaning that up.
Yeah, they have that
We are finding alternative sources of energy, solar, wind, geothermal, that will free us up from petrochemical. And I think the forces that drive us toward the consumption of petrochemical are inappropriate, to say the least. It's driven by greed, not by the desire to provide energy for people. So I think there are many, many alternatives that are rising up. Will they be in time? Hard to say. Do we each have a role in making sure they do? Yes.
I'm working with a colleague to try to get the ban on geoengineering. The spraying. I've had the water tested here in Mill Valley, and it has aluminum, barium, strontium, and sulfur nitrate. And I just found it also has silver iodide in it. Those are awful chemicals.
Right.
It's in our water. It's in our soil, and we breathe it.
Yep.
Oh God! But I focus on the solution, and the solution is getting it banned.
Well, there's so much to be against. And it's easy to be against something, but I always turn it around and say, if you're against war, are you for peace? And if you're for peace, what are you doing to promote peace in your life, your community, your country, your world? So that, to me, that's a challenge for all of us, that when you see something that makes you cringe or even cry, what positive steps can you take to make a difference? It can be very small. It could be very large. You can run for political office. You can recycle your trash or whatever, large to small, but that you're doing something
Contributing.
positive. And
Yes.
that is as cumulative as the destructive forces.
Like Mother Teresa said, if you want peace, you don't go to a war, anti-war rally, you go to a peace rally. Same
that.
idea.
I like that. Very
Anyway,
nice.
yeah. So, any more tidbits of gold nuggets that you want to share? Because we're getting down to our last few minutes.
Well, I don't know. You've asked some very unusual questions. These are not it's not the usual conversation that I have with someone. No, I've appreciated your perspective, your thoughtfulness, and I would just end on a note of real optimism. I think we're going to be okay as a species. It may take 2 or 3 more generations to see this play out, but all of us are here for a reason. We all came in to this place and this time to be part of this decision, to be part of solving this planetary crisis in consciousness and global ecology. So we all elected to be here. And the question is, what's your role? Why did you want back? And what are you doing to fulfill the commitment you made? If we can figure that out, we're going to be okay.
Absolutely. And thank you for all that you're doing for all of us. Raising the consciousness and awareness, and also hopefully taking action. I mean, I know I am, but
Right.
it'll assist people to take action to make things better for themselves. And thank you for your work, and thank you for being here with me.
Thank you. This has been a great conversation. Thank you.
Okay. Well, anyway, we finished a little bit early, but that's okay because that was a lot of information. I mean, without getting too technical or medical, etc.
We had a very good conversation. This was a far-reaching conversation. It really
Oh,
was.
well, good. I mean, I hope that's a good thing. I mean,
It is a good thing.
because my premise for my show is the waking up the unconscious mind, around wealth and love.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I like to get deep into conversations, especially when it comes to the heart.
Yep.
And I can see that you are totally dedicated to what you're doing from the heart.
Oh, it's 100%.
I mean,
It is
it's
from the
so
heart.
obvious.
And yeah, I mean, to have every action, every thought, every deed, every day be from the heart is not easy. But I can't think of at this point in my life, there's nothing else worth doing. I mean, if you're not acting from your heart with integrity, with resolve, trying to make the best difference in the world that you can, what are you here for?
That's right. One thing I learned from dearest Deepak Chopra
Yeah.
is that mindfulness, and when your heart and your mind are in sync,
Yes.
there's really, I mean, that's the perfect place to be.
Yes.
So mindfulness, and that to me is all inclusive. The
Totally agree.
brain, all of it.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm sure we could continue talking, but
Good.
it's
We'll do it again.
we'll do it again, and I might see you tomorrow.
Good. Well, I hope so. That'd be very nice.
No, Susanna said, "Are you coming tomorrow?" And I got one invitation, but I hadn't really committed to it because I'm juggling things
yeah.
myself, but maybe I will.
If you can, it would be great to see you.
Yes. Okay. Well, you have a good evening, and thank you.
Thank you again. Good night.
Okay.
That was good.
I challenged you a little bit.
You did, actually. It was
Stretching?
great. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
Good. Good. Well,
We'll do another.
okay.
All right. It's a date.
You're right.
Okay.